Well, there's a big Nosferatu movie coming out soon, but there's also a smaller one as well with Doug Jones that's due to arrive. So this seems to be Nosy's time. So I thought that it might be interesting to go back and check out some films that have previously dove into that territory to cash in on the silent classic. Although this isn't the standard ripoff list, because some of these are high-profile projects that some would call official remakes, but since they were done after the film went public domain, I'm calling them knockoffs. But feel free to complain about that in the comments. Also, there's less movies in here than usual since it's not a commonly knocked off film. But, I don't know. Why do I get the feeling that's about to change? Number 8. We are starting this off in an interesting way with 2018's Mimesis Nosferatu. It starts with a small child watching the silent Nosferatu and is mesmerized by it, and then proceeds to cut off all of his hair and cover his head in white makeup. And his mom is the discount Buffy, and he kills her while all done up like Max Schreck. It's then 10 years later, and a school is putting on a version of Dracula, and Tara here wants the lead role. And there's a school bully, of course. But then this big mysterious crate shows up in a garage, and there's a coffin inside, and it seems like Max is still in action, now painting himself a little bit better, and killing. Tara is flirted with by a new guy, although her ex isn't happy about that, but then, at the prep for the play, they decide not to go with Dracula after all, and instead do an adaptation of Nosferatu. And Michael joins up. And what's Michael's last name?
Morbius.
Morbius.
It's Morbin time.
But everyone has vamp names, like the professor is Kinski, and we'll see in a bit why that's relevant. But there's also a Jerry Dandridge on hand, and Tara's last name is Brewster, and I assume it's because she's so cool. Meanwhile, Max is making more vampires with encouragement from Frank Black. Not the Pixies one, though. And of course, these are humans, and they're breaking out their actual teeth and replacing them with fake vamp fangs. But is Max one of our crew of kids, or someone else entirely? The movie wants to throw us a whole bunch of red herrings and options, and I guess this is roundabout a sequel to Mimesis Night of the Living Dead. That was a bunch of psychos trying to reenact the classic Romero flick, but there's really very little link to that one here. In fact, neither IMDb nor Wikipedia reference it as being a sequel, and one connection is the title and involvement of Douglas Schultz. He was the director and co-writer of both films, and I guess also shares the theme of being obsessed with a horror film to the point of wanting to reenact it with deadly results. There is one character from the original Mimesis that returns here, making it an actual continuation instead of a thematic one. And it's fine. I think I like the first one a little bit better, but they're both decent enough, and this one actually ends on a cliffhanger, although no further follow-ups have been announced. Number 7. Okay, this next one is strange because it's only partially related and maybe shouldn't be on this list, but we're going to talk about 2023's Children of the Night. This is set during World War II, and a couple of soldiers are in the trenches and they encounter something, and they barely survive a bunch of bombs, but one of them has been injured in the neck. They have to take refuge in a big church and witness some German military discussing being attacked by some sort of large animal. Later, they end up staying with a French father and son, and when a random German attacks, one of the Americans is killed, leaving Jim on his own. But it seems like this family has some hidden secrets of their own. But then things take a turn when a romance sparks up between Jim and Louis. But then, after a while, they encounter this bat-like thing that has a Nosferatu-like appearance. And this little story is from William Stead, and he also wrote the picture, and it's his first full-length feature. He's done a number of short films and has done various crew positions on other things, though. But so here's a couple of reasons why I put this one up here. The first is the cover art, considering that the creature that's shown in battle looks very much like Count Orlok, although a little bit more exaggerated version. It's close to the creatures depicted in the film, even if they're a little bit more monstrous looking. But here's the other reason. This is called Children of the Night. Now, there's another movie with that name from the 90s, and that's also a vampire film, and according to IMDb, this one has also been called Trench Creature. And if you look for it online, it pretty much only shows up there as Children of the Night, like on places like Tubi. But if you go on YouTube, the whole movie is up there, but it's listed as being called Nosferatu Awakens. And that thumbnail is the big poster image with the Nosferatu-looking creature. But it's not mentioned as using that title anywhere at all outside of YouTube. So whatever company got the license to distribute it there, I guess figured it would get more views with the Nosferatu name attached to it. It's actually not bad at all. Like, it's a little slow and cheap, but there's some nice character bits and good dramatic moments, so I enjoyed it. Number 6. Here's another recent one, and one that's a pretty tenuous link, but it's pretty clear that they were making a connection with the title, and it's 2023's The Last Nosferatu. It gives us this guy named Ethan, and he's looking for love with online dating and not having much luck. And it's probably because the first thing he says to a woman that says it's nice to meet him is to ask for pictures that show more of herself. When that date goes badly, he goes back on and another woman messages him, and again, his first instinct is to ask for more pictures. He goes on a date with a woman who only calls herself Black Pearl, and they go to the quietest restaurant that I have ever heard. There's no one else there, I guess, and no music playing, like no sounds at all.
Take your time.
I should also point out that everyone, and I do mean everyone, has a really thick accent and speaks as if English is a second language. Ethan and Pearl go on a second date, and he says that he's a vegetarian, but she's not, since she takes a big bite out of his neck, because she's a vampire. Afterwards, he starts to show signs like wearing dark glasses and is now wearing all black clothes, and then just going through the cliches of movies about people turning into a vampire, just slower. And this is directed by Alan DeLaby, written by Alan DeLaby, produced by Alan DeLaby. And he also plays the main character of Ethan by Alan DeLaby. I'll give the guy credit for casting himself and not making himself this amazing guy that everyone loves and is just so good at everything. Like, the character's a bit of a loser, so I guess he doesn't fall into that whole egotistical director casts himself as the best version of himself that you see so frequently, and I may also be guilty of. He's French, and I'm assuming that everyone else is too here, and it even appears to have been filmed in France based on the shots of the outside, but it was filmed in English for release here. When Ethan vamps out, he gets that sort of bat-like Nosferatu look, which is, I assume, why they went with this title, because there's really not much else to associate it. And I think this is a case of Nosferatu being a generic term for vampire instead of a specific reference to the classic film. And yeah, it's not great. It's not unwatchable or anything, but it's kind of dull. Number 5. This next one is also weird, but I figured I should have it here because honestly, this whole list is weird. But it's 2014's Nosferatu in Love. This one's actually a short film, less than an hour long, and it's on a film set as an actor's wife leaves him and takes his son with her. The film that they're shooting is Nosferatu, and yep, under that makeup is Merlin, Dr. Sivana himself. Yes, that's freaking Mark Strong. He freaks out and heads into town where he meets one of the locals and decides that he wants to cause chaos in the area, much like Nosferatu would. He plans to release all the rats from the movie into the streets and ends up partying for a while, but he soon finds out a bit about the people there and has to reach his own bit of redemption. And this one is pretty quick because it's a short film that was done for a series called Playhouse Presents, a series of self-contained shorts for the UK. That had a variety of creators and featured some top-notch talent, including episodes with Haley Atwell, Emma Thompson, David Tennant, and tons more. This particular short was written and directed by Peter Strawn and was one of only 2 things that he directed, but he's been a writer for a bunch of high-profile projects. He wrote The Men Who Stare at Goats, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, Our Brand is Crisis, and also that notorious movie The Snowman, although it's hard to connect him to that considering how little of that film went to plan. This is actually really charming, and even though the story doesn't take much from Nosferatu, it's pretty obvious that the original film plays a part because of the setting, but also the black and white nature of it. Plus, you're getting Mark Strong in a fun role that I recommend seeking out, even if it's not horror in much of any way. Number 4. So this one is pretty odd because it's less of a ripoff and more of a cash-in, and I figured with the unusual nature of this list, it would still fit in, and it's 1998's Nosferatu the First Vampyre. First off, I'll explain why this is clearly a ripoff. Here's the box art. This is the poster for the movie with this vampiric-looking Rasputin dude staring at you with bared fangs and furrowed brow. He's also got a couple of scantily clad ladies beneath him, either ready to be victims or maybe vampires themselves. But now, here's why this is weird. This is just the classic 1922 Nosferatu, but now it has a different soundtrack. One by Typo Negative, the goth metal band led by the late Pete Steele, star of Playgirl magazine. But even that is a little shifty because, first of all, by this point the movie was in public domain, so basically anyone could release versions of it, and this version was overseen by Wayne J. Keeley, who did some re-editing of the original and then added an introduction by legendary actor David Carradine. According to the restored version, the original release of this was from a 16mm second generation of the American version of the film, which was very contrasty, featuring blown out details and had a bunch of splices and scratches visible, so it really wasn't the best quality. The weirdest part, though, is that even though it was hyped up as having music by Typo and presented as them doing like an original score for the film, instead they simply gave permission to use their existing music throughout. So, basically, it just ends up feeling like you're watching Nosferatu while listening to the band in the background. So, it's not exactly a very unique experience. I'll say this, though. The band's music fits it really well, and ultimately, it's a nice way to watch the film. Like, if you're a fan of it, like, since the moody tunes play into the imagery really well. That said, if you've never seen the film, it's probably not the best way to see it for the first time. And also, if you're not a fan of it or silent films in general, it's not likely to win you over and make you like it. Number 3. So this one's pretty wild now because now we're checking out 1988's Nosferatu in Venice, although it's also called Vampire in Venice, and it begins with the group out hunting, and they accidentally shoot down a bat. We're in Venice, of course, and Van Helsing from Dracula 2000 is here, and he's there to try to locate a vampire named Nosferatu, and believes that he actually desires death. He's called to Venice by a princess, and she believes that Nosferatu may indeed be sealed up in a tomb in their castle basement. There's also a priest on hand, although he might just be a psychiatrist, and he tries to dissuade them from what they're doing, and it seems like a long time ago, like they tried to banish Nosy, and we get a good look at him, and he's the infamous perv Klaus Kinski, and more on him later, but things don't go as planned, and impalements all around. It's said that he then left Venice and was never heard from again, and they hold a seance to try to contact him, which awakens him from his slumber. He immediately starts to stalk his prey, which for some reason means more impalements, and he is determined to find the princess as she bears a striking resemblance to his old lover. And, this is an Italian film, and it's directed by Augusto Carmenito, who is mostly known as a writer and producer, but we'll talk about that in a second. He was the producer on this film and also did the screenplay, and he landed Kinski as the lead. And They originally wrote the thing as a sequel to Werner Herzog's take on Nosferatu, which we'll also talk about in a bit. Somewhere along the way, though, the idea of it being a sequel was dropped when Kinski refused to don the makeup and bald look with the protruding teeth because he found it all uncomfortable. Originally, the director was Mario Caiano, who had previously worked with Kinski, but he and the actor clashed repeatedly to the point that Caiano walked off the project. Kinski was a bit of a monster on set, demanding to direct scenes himself, not listening to any direction, and all of the scenes that he himself handled were just shots of him walking around Venice. He also assaulted several women on set to the point that they were scared to even be in scenes with him. Everything was such a disaster that Caminito had to step in and finish directing the film himself. But after 6 weeks of shooting, he couldn't continue on with the project, so he simply took whatever he had and decided to try to make it all work. And it kind of doesn't. I mean, it's pretty dull and it's really convoluted, and Kinski really thinks that he's working some smoldering sexiness, but he ends up looking like he's trying to hold in a fart and failing. Number 2. The next one is one that you knew was going to be on here, and it's a great one because we're talking about 2000's Shadow of the Vampire. It's set in 1921, and we see F.W. Murnau directing Nosferatu, and he's Malkovich, and Dragonetti is here too, but they still haven't cast their vampire. But then Susie Izzard announces that there is an actor cast, and his name is Max Schreck, but he's a mystery, a complete unknown. They all head out to shoot on location at a remote inn out in the countryside, and there's some unusual things going on, like the director removing crucifixes, and the delivery of a live ferret to one of the rooms. The next day they shoot a scene and see their character, Count Orlok, for the very first time, and are told the actor requires solitude and privacy. But then, the cameraman, Wolfgang, is found collapsed in the hallway with no knowledge of how he got there. They continue shooting, with the Count acting particularly odd during filmmaking, and the dread Pirate Roberts is on hand as well, but Schreck starts to battle wits with Murnau about whose picture it really is, while preying on the crew. Of course, that pisses the director off, since he still needs them to finish the damn film. And this one is from E. Elias Merhige, I don't know. And this guy knows about gothy atmosphere since he was the director of 1989's Begotten, a movie that lives forever in my nightmares. At this point, he had gotten a bunch of attention as a music video director, doing clips for Marilyn Manson and Danzig. Weirdly, he didn't do a lot after this, I guess because his next film was a box office bust with Subject Zero, but then he mainly just went back to doing theater. This was almost a very different film because it was produced by Nick Cage's company, and he had intended for himself to play Schreck, but when Dafoe showed interest in doing the part, he stepped aside. I, myself, am pretty thankful for that, since I feel like the character would have then just been way more over the top, and Dafoe just nailed it. Because, even if this one didn't blow up the box office, it was massively acclaimed and was even nominated for 2 Oscars. And Dafoe was up for Best Supporting Actor. And it also got a nom for makeup and hair, but unfortunately, it won neither. Number 1. We're going to end this appropriately because in 1979, 57 years after the original was released, there was a remake called Nosferatu the Vampyre. It begins strangely because we meet Possession's Isabella Gianni and her husband, the guy who's Adolf Hitler in all those memes. I'll tell you why it's strange in a second, because right now I'm distracted by this tiny kitty, a throwback to the one from 1922 film, because if there's a cat in the original, you damn better put one in the remake or else it's instantly garbage. But it's strange because they call each other Lucy and Jonathan, and it said that their last name is Harker, although those are characters from Dracula and not Nosferatu. John is sent by his boss to Transylvania on a real estate deal, and he goes on the journey and stops at a local inn where he says he's going to Dracula's castle. So this is clearly mixing the two stories. His trek takes him through some gorgeous scenery, and he finally arrives at the Count's castle. And like I mentioned earlier, he's played by Klaus Kinski, although here his makeup more closely resembles that of the original Nosferatu, although it's meant to be Dracula. Things follow the event of either story pretty closely, and it emulates some of the original shots, showing that even in 1979 there was like pandering fan service. And of course, it follows the plot of Dracula almost exactly, even bringing in Renfield, because after all, Nosferatu was essentially the first mockbuster, making a film that was as much of Stoker's novel as it could be without being exact. It still got in trouble for it though, and this was handled by the eccentric Werner Herzog, director of so many bizarre and interesting films, and he worked with Kinski pretty frequently, although their relationship was rather infamously strained. Here, the intention was always to basically make Dracula, but wrap it up in the trappings of Nosferatu and pay homage to each. Herzog considered the Murnau film to be one of the greatest of all time, and the original script was solely focused on being a remake of that. But when Dracula became public domain, he changed the names to make it a dual interpretation. It was heavily critically acclaimed, and people revered the look of the film, the atmosphere, and the performances. Even Kinski approached this role with more respect than usual, and even though he hated the makeup, he said it was worth it to play Dracula. There seems to be less talk of his behind-the-scenes behavior with this film, meaning that he was either more respectful to the material, or Herzog was more skilled with reining him in. All in all, even though it's not a direct remake of Nosferatu, considering that it's yet another remake of Dracula, it's as close as we're gonna get, well, until this new one. So there you have it, a bunch of movies that I'm just calling knockoffs. No, they're not really. I mean, a lot of these things are just taking inspiration from or just repackaging, whichever. It was just a nice way to package this video and talk about some things that are Nosferatu related for you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did, actually. Most of the movies in this roster were pretty solid. There was a couple of clunkers in there, but for the most part, this was actually a really good watch through. Let me know which of these you like. Let me know if you're excited about the new Nosferatu movie. I'm going to go check that out. Let me know also which of these you would now like to see. Tell me that in the comments down below. Also, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy the channel, give it a subscribe. If you want notified when new videos come out, hit that little bell icon. And also check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines. And you can help support the channel just like these guys do. They're awesome for doing that. You'd be awesome if you went there. You're also awesome just for keeping on watching these videos, which I do appreciate. And I'll see you very shortly for another great one. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.